this or?
No, we won't. It's a webinar, not a meeting.
Okay.
But we're gonna let everybody log on, and I gotta hit. There's a way to just give me 1 second. I thought there was a way to broadcast. It may not let me do this. Oh no, I can't broadcast because I don't have Christina's account hooked up. Okay, so it's okay. That is okay. Hello, everybody. We're gonna get started very shortly. Just give us a second. We're just gonna let some people get on. Ooh, there's people from the States, from Canada. So exciting. Hope everybody's having a great week so far. Can't believe it's mid-June, like we're almost halfway through this year already. Doesn't it feel like New Year's was yesterday? Oh, you're muted. You don't have to be muted.
Just say New Year's. You got New Year's.
We can chat. We can chat.
Your year has definitely been moving a lot slower than mine. If you got I'm still like, where did Mother's Day go? That's where I am.
Oh, and Sharon's on. Hi, Sharon. Just saying hi. Feel free to put things in the chat. And as we go through, we'll get started right away, but feel free to put any comments in the chat, ask any questions that you like. We're happy to, oh, Robin's there too. Hey, Robin. We're happy to answer things. This is going to be a very dialogue-based webinar. So that I'm going to present a few things, but it's largely going to be me, Pat Lee, and myself just having a nice chat about some things that are very important. And I think she has such amazing experience. So we'll give it one. Someone put their hand up. Oh, there's Sharon says hi. She waved hi.
Hi. It's not funny because I don't think I can see.
You can't as a panelist. No.
No, I can see that people are in there, but oh, I can see the names, but I'm not.
There you go.
I'm not seeing who is. Hi everyone, welcome. I'm seeing lots of familiar names. I can't see you to wave at you, but I'll wave. You like
Pat Lee loves you. All right. Okay, so we'll get. Well, there's a cute question already. Oh, the chat is disabled. Yeah, just asking the. I don't know why it's disabled. I thought it was on, but that's okay. Just put things in the Q&A. That's perfect. Close that. Why is the chat? Let me see if I can fix that. Oh. I don't know. It says it's on. I don't know. Let me see. I don't know if that works. I tried making it available to everybody, so I'm not sure. I'll do a test and then we'll get started. All right, everybody, welcome. Bonjour, bonjour. My name is Christy and I am the Managing Director of Ignite Purpose Canada. And before we get into some introductions, I just want to first acknowledge, of course, that all of us, wherever we are gathered in North America, we're living and working on ancestral lands that are still inhabited by the diverse and vibrant Native communities that live here today. We respect the treaties that were made on these lands and dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Miigwech. All right, so let's get started. So today we're going to, of course, have some introductions, but a lot of you know me already, and some of you I know Pat Lee, which is great. I'm going to share a little bit about what is a belonging culture and why is it so important to foster in your workplaces. Then Pat Lee is going to share her amazing insights and wisdom, and we're going to do it sort of interview style. So I'm going to interview Pat Lee, and we're going to have just a really nice chat, which is going to be full of wisdom for you guys. And then I always end these webinars with the good news, because sometimes when we hear all these things that we could be doing, maybe we think of things that, oh, I haven't been doing that yet. But the good news is that this is always a process. We can always improve. So no matter where you're at right now, and even if you're doing great things, just know that there's always good news at the end. We always end on a high note. And then I will also have information about the toolkit. So with our webinars, we always provide additional documents and tools that you can use to help implement the information that you learned today in a way that makes sense for you and applies to your operations. All right, so let's get into to, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I had a little technical difficulty, so I've got to move the slides in two places. So first, let's introduce us. I'll share a little bit about myself, but I'm not going to do much talking about myself. I am the managing director of Ignite Purpose Canada. We opened our Canadian business just in February, but Ignite Purpose has been a coaching and consulting firm that's been very successful in Australia for the last 10, 11, 12 years or so. And we are run by our global CEO, Christina Foxwell, and we're now open in Canada, the UK, South Africa, Australia, and soon Southeast Asia will be joining us as well. So we're super excited about that. And then I want to introduce our amazing guest. So today we have Pat Lee. She's this lived experience researcher. She's a storyteller. She's a writer. She's a mental health advocate. She has a PhD in peace and conflict studies. She is brilliant. And she's also is the founder and lead of Ryu Mindfulness Collective, which is based out of Pinawa in Manitoba, but she also does services all across the nation and through Zoom and different outlets like that, which is really exciting. So Pat Lee, I'm butchering your intro. So tell us a little bit about you.
I think you covered it. I would butcher it as well because it's a lot to try to fit in. But yeah, I think you covered it, and the slide says all of it. So I'm just left to say thanks for inviting me to speak on this really interesting topic of belonging, which is, it's one of those topics that's really kind of near and dear to me. It's one I've been looking at from all angles, as a parent, as a professional, as a peace builder, as a social entrepreneur, and a lived experience storyteller. So I'm really excited to get into some of the questions, and from you as well as from the webinar attendees.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being here today with us. We absolutely love you at Ignite Purpose, and me as a close personal friend, I adore you. And I'm just really, really grateful that you're here with us today. So before we get to Pat Lee's wisdom, I'm going to impart just a couple little nuggets. I'm definitely not as brilliant, but I'm pretty excited about this topic too. Yeah.
More brilliant.
Thank you. Why is it important to belong? And you know what, there's been a lot of studies lately on this topic. Well, what is belonging? Well, first we're going to look at culture, I think. And culture is that collection of attitudes, beliefs, behaviors that make up the regular atmosphere in a work environment. So the top reasons in Canada an employee would quit their job, especially post-pandemic, have been highlighted through studies as they've experienced an increase in burnout, the amount and timing of their work hours, as well as the difficulty unplugging, and of course, challenges communicating with their colleagues. And if you look at the slide, it says that although this poll said 27% would consider culture a key factor, when I think about what the points I just said, the items listed as the number one reason a person would leave, such as long hours, a blurry work-life balance, that would also fall under the definition of culture. The thing is too, if the culture is different than what is healthy for you, it's not going to feel like you belong there either, right? So if we look at some of these figures, 1/3 of all employees quit within probation period because the company didn't meet their expectations. More than half believe they understand the company's culture within 1 month of being with that company. And almost half believe culture is critical for workplaces to be successful. We hear examples from clients frequently. For instance, I just met with an executive the other day who recognized that interdepartmentally, the only time they had actual work reasons to speak to certain departments was if there was a problem. So they were only engaged with each other when they needed to troubleshoot or find answers to problems. So imagine that feeling of belonging, how that might feel if right off the bat, you would feel answering a call from an employee you already know is only going to have problems for you. The good news was this manager was really invested. Once they really put their finger on that, they're like, whoa, 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 we need to come up with some solutions. And they got strategic about socializing. Isn't that funny that we would spend more time at work doing some socializing in order to improve performance and foster this amazing culture? But they recognize that people that feel they belong together work better together. 2 slides. One sec. Did the wrong thing again. Oh, hang on. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Oh, man. Okay. We know we have belonging when we can show that opinions of the work community count, that there are meaningful and rich relationships at work between individuals and the departments, like I just mentioned, and that there's a high degree of cultural competence, and that's where leaders are comfortable and prefer working with people that are different and diverse from them. Oh, somebody signed in as you, Patty.
Oh, oh, hi, Glory.
It's okay. I'm just going to mute her if that's okay.
Sorry, I'm on mute.
Yeah. There we go. Perfect.
I think I may have sent the wrong link.
See, I love it. That's what I said. I love that these always end up being.
I think I might have sent the wrong link, but this is perfect.
It's not, we're happy that you're here. We're happy that we're here.
Hi, Glory.
Okay. Between my tech issues. So when we talk about opinions counting as part of the fostering a sense of belonging, often we'll hear leaders say things like, well, I have an open door policy. People can come and talk to me anytime. Or people, share stuff with me often, sideways. They just kind of pass by and say what they need to, but they know where to find me if they have an issue. But really, there's a couple things to think with that. Is it always up to the employee to come and foster that sense of belonging with their leader or their manager? Or does the manager reach out back to them? Do they do more than just saying I have an open door policy? Do they actually encourage one-on-one, one-to-one chats and discussions? And how often do those discussions actually lead to tangible action and improvement? Because if people speak up, but nothing ever changes, then people tend to hesitate to participate. And there was a study, and you can see that here from Gallup. They said only 1/3 of workers believe that their voice actually makes difference or contributes positively. And that's really hidden potential. That is hidden talent. There are ideas and thoughts that can be mined from your people, but if they don't feel it's worth it to participate or speak up, then you're going to miss a big opportunity within the talent that you already have within your 4 walls. Great cultures listen and understand also the value of lived experiences and different perspectives. Can we make every single change that comes across our desk? No, but we can often find wisdom and strategies for improvement by listening to our people. How we respond directly correlates to the amount of engagement our teams choose to invest in. And then, of course, meaningful relationships are the other component to creating a culture of belonging, or measuring belonging. With remote work, there's definitely some challenges. Some are noticing what's called a distance bias, and that can happen even in office. You could be sitting near someone and still have distance bias, which I'll explain in a second. But we tend to work better with those that we are physically close to because we get to know them the most, because we spend the most time interacting with them, learning from each other. And if we interact by email or chat only, we never ever see the other person's face or hear their voice. It can be easy to forget that there's an actual human being on the other end of that communication. And studies show, Pat Lee, were talking about this in the green room before the webinar started, that there's actually a strong correlation between having a best friend at work and business performance. We used to, I know some of us have lived in the time where we joke about having the work husband or the work wife, but really a work bestie is critical. And it is important that managers provide the time to create opportunities for people on their teams to socialize and get to know one another. People take care of what and who they care about. They are most comfortable collaborating with peers because they feel trust within them. The team and humans have a basic need for security. We all do. And humans that feel safe are often the ones that are most connected to others. And then the third component of having a great culture of belonging is cultural competence. And that's when we go above and beyond simply tolerating those different than us, that we actually focus on building appreciation for the differences between all of us. Building this type of competence takes active listening, which means validating another person's lived experience, demonstrating empathy by seeing a situation from another person's eyes, and engaging others in meaningful dialogue that is based on behaviors or systems more than just personal identity. So for instance, if someone disagrees with you, instead of judging them for just being wrong, you can ask, that's really interesting that you see the situation that way. I would love to learn why this perspective is important to you. Maybe there's something I need help to see. Could you share a little more with me about why you think that way? That would be a way of expressing cultural competence within the team. So now I'm really excited because now we're going to get to the part where Pat Lee gets to share. I'm just so excited. So I have some questions prepared. We're going to have a nice little chat. You ready, Pat Lee? Rapid fire? Well, maybe not rapid, just fire. Just fire. Yeah.
I'm ready. Not too rapid with the fire though.
I won't be too rapid. Okay. So Pat Lee, thank you again for being here. You are a highly qualified professional in this space. But first and foremost, you are also a human who moved to a new country to lay down roots in both your personal and professional life. So as a person, how do you describe a sense of belonging, and what are the experiences that contributed to you finding where you belonged here?
Oh, that's a really big question there. How do you describe belonging? Belonging is one of those things. So I'm going to give you, well, you know me, Chrissy. For anyone else in the audience, like if you haven't met me or heard me speak before, I hopefully you'll get to the end of the answers that I have to give you. You'll get a sense of exactly who I am and why I come at these things with this kind of orientation. And I'm going to say, to begin answering that question, is that belonging is one of those things that you know as a result of encountering its complete opposite. You know what it feels like when you belong, when you've experienced what it feels like to not belong. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And interestingly, it's those of us who have the lived experience of not belonging that tend to have the best information about how to create cultures of belonging. Yet, we are the ones that are least heard. Yeah. If that makes sense. We're not the ones that are at the table making decisions and implementing these things. In fact, there was a 2022 research study that was done by a company called Coquel. They were formerly known as the Center for Talent Innovation. So HR oriented that did this study. And what they identified was that white men and white women have the highest median belonging scores on their survey, right, compared to other races and ethnicities. And that Asian and Black women, not surprisingly, none of this is surprising at all, have the lowest median scores of belonging, right? None of this is shocking, right? And we're not applying any judgment here to say that it is good or bad. Like, this is just the way that things are. But when we think about who is at the table and who is making decisions versus who is complaining about not having that sense of belonging or feeling the consequences of feeling that they don't belong, then this is the reason why I think it's important for us to be able to gather in spaces like these and have this conversation. Because for me, belonging is a situation of finding yourself in a space among people where you feel appreciated for what you bring to the group. Belonging is the sense of being part of a group or part of an organization or part of an institution where there is a genuine desire to have a meaningful relationship with individuals at all levels. So having it with your peers as well as subordinates to leaders, leaders to subordinates, and among the different groups and teams that make up the organization. Chrissy, I thought it was really interesting that point that you made about that CEO that was talking about the only time that they encountered other members of other departments and so on was when there was a problem. That's a real issue when it comes to belonging. Think about those of us that have to call the IT department or work with someone in IT. Like, think about that. Like, we only ever talk to people in IT when we have a problem. So no wonder, you know, people who are in IT related jobs have this particular sense around them and like where they sit within organizations and their sense of, you know, if you start to really drill down and ask them about where they work and who they are and things like that, that they have that sense, maybe, you know, that they don't necessarily, they're there to solve problems. They're not necessarily part of the team, right? So it's having that meaningful relationship. And then it's also, belonging is also recognizing the full worth of people when they come into the space, right? And when I say the space, I mean the group, the team, the organization, the building, whatever. So belonging is needing to recognize that the differences in the way that people move and interact with a space, how they handle problems, how they advocate for themselves, how they advocate for those around them, how they advocate for who else is not at the table, that all of that feeds into the mix of what creates that sense of belonging, right? So at the end of the day, I feel like, you know, yeah, it's kind of narrowing it down to this idea that I know that I feel belonging. I feel like I belong when I am in a space or a situation where I am being seen for my unique contributions. I'm not just being seen because I'm the Black woman with the weird haircut and the very loud voice.
Love your hair.
That's all I think. It gives me all kinds of issues. So I'm always kind of like, I call it weird. There you go. There you go. Nobody else is allowed to call it weird, but I call it weird. So the Black woman with the weird haircut. So I'm being seen for my unique contributions, and my unique contributions are coming from not just the skill sets that I have, but the experiences that I have as well, because that's going to inform my perspective, like seeing everybody in that realm, right? And then I get that sense of belonging when I'm feeling like me and my coworkers, I don't necessarily have to be friends with them, but I have to feel connected to them in some way. I need to see their success as my success in a sense, right? That's basically it. We don't have to be friends, but we all need to be on that same page of being able to say that, yeah, we are all going to be successful to whatever measure we want to determine that success is. And then I also, you know, feel myself belonging when I'm in a space where in my daily work, in my career, professional development, I'm feeling supported by the policies, the behaviors, you know, the outcomes that I am seeing. And at the end of the day, I feel like I belong when I'm feeling really proud of the team that I am with, the group, organization, what it is that they're doing, what it is that they're trying to accomplish, even though we might not be successfully achieving all of those things, but we have those goals in the back of our minds, right? So, so I've worked and lived and studied in a number of different cultural and social and geographic spaces, and I can tell you, Chrissy, that the space where I felt like I most belong had its own failures in creating the conditions for belonging. Isn't that funny? The space where I felt I most belonged had lots of failures with creating the conditions of belonging, right? Still, what made me feel like I had that sense of belonging was that there was always that willingness to sit with and to ask the questions and to let the conversation and the conflicts around belonging happen, right? That is how you get a sense of belonging to grow. I think there is this misconception that we need to walk in and immediately feel like we belong to the space. Belonging is something that we work on collectively, right? Because before we came there, the space wasn't diverse enough. You know, but before we each walked into that space, it wasn't diverse enough. And now that we're there, we're making it more diverse, and now we have the opportunity to create the condition of belonging for ourselves and for other people. That's kind of the way that I kind of look at it.
Absolutely. There's two things there that you said that I really like. At the beginning, you said what I learned most about what belonging is by experiencing the opposite of what belonging is, right? What belonging isn't has really shown what belonging means. And I think that's really powerful. And that's also part of believing people's lived experiences, right? Not what we intended for people to feel, not what we intended to communicate, but what are people actually experiencing, right? And listening to them, giving them the space and hearing that that's their experience. And the other thing that made me giggle when you talked about IT, I'm like, well, that was me, because I was in the safety department and I would be like, hey, it's Chrissy from safety. Oh, don't worry, I'm the cool safety person. Get it, right? Because you don't want to have, you want to belong, but the safety person never belongs because they're always the one that's going to be cracking the whip, right? So, so on the other side, so now that you mentioned that you've experienced what isn't, which helped you describe what belonging is, and I don't want you to out any employers or organizations or anything like that, but could you give us maybe an example or two of things that happened in work and life that were actually exclusionary that really helped shine a light on, if I belonged, it would have felt different?
Can I tell you this? Can I tell you this in the form of a story? This way I don't have to minimize or exclude anyone, right? So
we love stories.
So I love stories. So, and I know you love stories. So hopefully other people, I love stories. So two examples that I can easily think of feeling that sense of not belonging. And so that sense of not belonging drove the work, or really drive the work that I do now to create spaces of belonging. Is I'll give you the latest one, the earliest one first. So this was my first post-military experience, which was an amazing learning experience for me. So for those of you who are attending, Chrissy didn't mention this, but the first I would say 10 years roughly of my adult life, from about age 19 till about age 28, I was a commissioned officer in the Jamaica Defense Force, and I retired around 2005 at the rank of captain. So then I came to Canada, did my master's in political studies, and then went back home to Jamaica, and I got my first post-military full-time job, really exciting position. It was a really high-profile organization, government organization that was doing work on accountability and anti-corruption. And so I was really excited to be there. I felt like I could really contribute. It was a really great position, great pay, great benefits, lots of opportunity for growth. I felt like, yeah, this is the space where I'm supposed to now grow, take off. I'm going to belong. Then I learned really quickly after being in the organization that there was something incredibly wrong. None of the employees were happy, right? Nobody was happy. They were doing really fantastic work on the outside, like they were getting lots of things done, right? They were living up to their mandate, but the people inside, the people who were doing the work, were extremely frustrated. They were afraid, everybody was afraid to advocate for themselves. They didn't have a voice. They felt they couldn't trust each other, right? And they were told that they couldn't even trust themselves because of the level of micromanaging that was happening within the organization, right? Right? So do you hear the way that I put that? They were told they couldn't trust themselves because of the level of micromanaging. That's what micromanagement does to people. It makes them not trust their own sense of wisdom and intuition.
It's a gaslight almost, yeah.
Yeah. And so what had happened was that the new leadership in this organization from the beginning, right, had deemed everyone that was there before that leader came as being implicit in some, he had pretty much demeaned everyone by implying and in words a number of things, and I'll put this into the context of things that the actions would say. The action said, you people who are here before I came, the way that you've been doing things is part of the problem, and that problem has been plaguing accountability and anti-corruption in and of itself. You people that have been here before, your previous leader was as corrupt as a people that you all were mandated to hold accountable. And you people that have been here before, I can't trust you, and I will only trust the people that I hire or bring in, right? So this is sadly what I was coming into as a new employee in the space, right? So right away, that sense of connectedness to the team wasn't there, right? The meaningful relationships at work couldn't be there because nobody trusted. None of the old people trust the new people, and the new people were being told that they shouldn't trust the old people who were there. And that in and of itself was a problem. That really created a lot of challenges with being able to work effectively within the space. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but Jamaica is a pretty homogeneous society as far as race is concerned, right? Over 76% of the population is of African descent. So we're a largely Black population. Black is the minority. So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not talking about differences in race so much, right? But one of the things that we do have to talk about is what people bring when we talk about diversity. And this was my first experience in diversity leading to exclusion. Because here now, I was this individual who was highly educated and there were lots of other people in the company who were educated, but I was educated in a different area outside of the typical education pool that they draw on, right? This was an organization that tended to draw on lawyers. And I was here not a lawyer, but as a social scientist, right? And I had lived experiences that allowed me to bring a diverse experience to the situation. But I never felt like I belonged because I had a value system that was telling me that I can't be part of an organization that is hurting and demeaning people, right? Even though I was being lifted up, right? And so one of the interesting things that I've experienced in my life is that nearly every position that I have been hired into, I was either the first woman or one of a handful of women, but I always came from the atypical background, right? I wasn't your typical, expectation in terms of the trajectory of a female career. And so that says something about organizations' willingness. If you're willing to hire me, yes, you're willing to hire diversity of opinion, and diversity of experience. But just as you said in the beginning, Chrissy, if you want to grow a culture of belonging, what you also have to pay attention to is that diversity means that you are going to have to change the way that you do things, and it means that you're going to have to deepen and double down on your values. So within a few months of being in that organization, there was that feeling of overall disconnectedness because most people were moping around, miserable, quietly complaining about the conditions of work, not trusting each other. And then there was a bigger picture of trying to do this work, trying to do the things that I was hired to do, but every time I would make a point of advocating for someone else on the team, I was told, well, that's not going to happen, until it got to a point of the conversation between myself and leadership was now one where I was getting the implicit action of, quote, well, I don't trust you anymore because you're now advocating for the people that I don't trust, right? And so that was a huge learning moment for me because now I have to take it. I have to now talk about, if I'm going to say that I value meaningful relationships and I value treating people with respect and dignity and appreciating difference, it means that I now have to ask the question, do I belong in this space?
Yes.
Right? Maybe this isn't the place where I belong. And so my point here is that in many instances, we talk about wanting diversity, but we don't know how to facilitate that inclusion, right? We want lots of people to come into the party to make our party more interesting, but we don't know how to organize the party to make sure that those people who come in can actually enjoy themselves, right? That's the inclusion part. And then when those people ask for something else to be done and we ignore them, and we say, well, you shouldn't have been here in the first place, or maybe you should, instead of asking for something to change, you should just put up with this thing that we have here because this is how we've always done it, then we are completely out to sea when it comes to the whole concept of belonging, right?
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you had talked about, new managers coming in and sort of destroying it, not destroying a team, but you know what I mean? Like not allowing the people that were already there to be part of. And I know that's cultural competence right there. Like, so I think about teams that I've been on early in my career where a new leader came in and sure enough, they find a way to sort of get rid of anybody that was there before them and bring in people that they already know that they can work with from their old teams or whatever. I've done this myself as a leader, as a young leader, not really understanding that, thinking, well, can now I get to choose my team? But I'm picking the same people, but there's actually a benefit to maybe getting to know the people that are already there. That is what makes a diverse leader, right? That's cultural competence right there. To be able to look at these people that we don't know yet, that we know have an experience there already, and then getting curious to discover what's great about them. Why are they here? Right? That's cultural competence right there. You just really made me think of that. And I was like, oh, I did that once. It was bad. But we learn, and that's the good news, is we learn from each other as we share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where the discussion about lived experiences becomes so important, because we don't know what we don't know until we hear it from someone else. And so being able to listen to people's experiences and hear what it is that they are feeling, finding their way through, struggling with, and also celebrating, right? We need to pay attention to those things, whether and it's not just a leadership thing, it's leadership, staff, co-workers. We need to pay attention to these things, because that is the only way that we're going to get DEI to work, right? It won't work as policies that are written down. And then we say, well, here is the policy. But then someone is still living in the experience and the circumstance of that policy not working for them. Because I'll give you another example of, and then I frame this now as another story of working with a Canadian organization. And so I guess I'm going to, like, are you familiar with the open office?
Yes.
Concept? Right? Everybody work nowadays, like open office is like to do and the whole thing. And there is this interesting thing with, again, when we pay attention to individuals and individual stories, as opposed to just taking a policy-driven or a paperwork or a procedural approach to thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion. And we begin to talk about that element of belonging, which is not documented in the procedure, but this is the human element coming in that is going to guide the way that we apply all of those things that are written down. So this is another experience that I will tell in the form of a lived experience story, where I worked with one organization. This is here now on the Canadian side, where I have to admit that. So I'm probably one of those one of those persons that I would describe as being highly sensitive, right? It is very challenging for me to work in an open concept environment. I find that I am much more productive when I'm in a quiet space where I can work. And it is, for me, having people, hearing lots of keyboards and phones ringing and stuff like that, or the fax machine going and the copier going, or people talking, even if they're not speaking to me, all those things, like it becomes a little bit jarring for me as an individual, and it affects the way that I work. I am not my most productive when I'm in a situation like that, right? Now, we have lots of policies that have to do with facilitating visible disabilities, right? If we divide people into these contexts of able and not able, right? And if you're able, then we assume that, there's no need for any kind of accommodation or allowance if there is any kind of invisible thing that would affect you. But that doesn't work in a work environment where you have people who are neurodiverse or have different levels of sensitivity that can impact the way that they are productive in their spaces. So I recall, for myself, what I would do, because it was an open office space and I would go, but we had these private meeting rooms, right? Where you could book a private meeting room if you had a meeting or if you were meeting with a client. And I remembered I would, trying to solve the problem for myself, if you will. I said, okay, I'm not very productive when I'm here and all of what's going on in the room. So I'm just gonna take myself over into this unoccupied meeting room and just work from here. And I did that for a few days and I found that I worked much better until I was approached by the leader of the team, who then came to me and said, why are you using the space? And I said, I kind of find it a lot better to focus and concentrate when I'm here. And they're like, but what are other people on the team gonna think? They're gonna think you don't like them, right? They're gonna think they did something wrong, or you're not being a team player when you do things like that, right? And for the person who is not in the right space with their own sense of self-awareness and needs awareness, a conversation like that is going to be interpreted as, you are not enough, you are not doing enough, right? Rather than skewing the conversation in a way that says, okay, what exactly is the problem and how can I help you with this? And so I think about that every time I speak with some of my clients who experience different levels of neurodiversity and the things that impact them and the way that they feel, the heaviness and that dissonance that they feel with going to their place of work. And when they ask for example, the flexibility to work from home, this was one of the problems that I had in this space as well. It's like, I don't work my best here. I don't feel my best physically and mentally, but I want to be a part of this team and I want to contribute, but I feel like I can do that in my own private space and you're not able to give me that. Can I work from home? And nope, don't do that, right? Instead of being able to say, okay, what do we need to do to facilitate that sense of belonging? So again, diversity, but we invited lots of people to the party, right? And we do this, and this is where we get those words like tokenism, right? We bring people in, we say we want these people into the party, but we don't actually do the things that are needed in order to have them stay and contribute. That is what belonging is about. What can we do to have people stay and contribute? So I often say that diversity is like inviting people to the party because we want to make it like a really hip party that everybody wants to come to. But then belonging is saying, come to the party as you are, because you're gonna make it great as you are.
I love that. I love that. So what are some of the business outcomes that you have seen from organizations that you've worked with that have actually been successful at fostering belonging?
Yeah, it's a good one. So yeah, you touched on some of the research that talks about how, how many studies, especially recently and post-COVID, that, the sense of belonging at work, increasing job performance and decreasing the amount of sick days that people will take off from work. I think there's one Better Up study that talks about that sense of belonging leading to like a 75% decrease in sick days.
Yes.
Right? And like a 56% rise in job performance. So I am a qualitative researcher and storyteller through and through. So, the proof for me is always listening to people's experiences. And, the things that we see is that when we have diverse opinions and a recognition that when we have leaders and staff, so we can't forget the staff in this, right? Because the staff and co-workers are equally important to the leadership. When we have leaders and staff who value diverse opinions and see everyone and on their team as a thought leader, right? Or a potential thought leader, see everyone on the team as a potential thought leader, in circle work, I use a lot of circle work in my own practice. And the concept behind circle work, we sit in a circle, we do what we're doing in a circle, we talk in a circle based on the premise that there is a leader in every chair, right? Everybody has something that they can contribute, and everyone can be a thought leader in their own right. So when we get people around us that can create that sense of value and appreciation of difference, what we get is a reduction in othering, right? The us versus them dynamic, right? So to go back to that example that you'd raised about calling people in only when, or contacting people only when there was a problem, right? Only when there is a problem, like one thing that we have in common is that we've worked in workplace health and safety, and when you work in workplace health and safety, you only get called when there is a problem. And that in and of itself creates that us versus them dynamic, right? So the thing that we need to pay attention to is that what is missing is really the willingness to listen, right? The willingness to genuinely listen purposefully and without judgment, and to bring people in our space, because to bring people in our space so that we can actually listen to them, we need to dedicate time to listening to them, right? And what this does for the people that I've engaged with practice, for the people who have been doing this work with me and they take it back into their organization, what they learn is that we can move out of this procedural element of saying that we're doing things to actually going into the personal element of actually doing the thing, right? Because we're learning how to do it and we're actually implementing it as part of our practice. And what we're doing with listening, really listening to people, is that we're actually moving out of that place of selfing, right? Where everything that we hear, everything that someone says, every action of someone is interpreted from the lens of I, me, and mine. And we're moving into that space where we can attend and listen to people and see what it is they're asking for, and tuning into the things that they're actually saying that they need, paying attention to the untold stories, the stories that we're not necessarily hearing when someone says, you know, I'm not feeling too well today, and I think I'm not going to come in, right? What are we, you know, not that we're saying you should read things into that, but if you've been paying attention, if you've been listening, you know, you see the trends and you look at the circumstances, and it becomes not a surprise that that person quits 3 months down the road, and you now have to spend tons of money trying to figure out how you're going to get someone to replace that person and all of that thing and retrain the other person. This is what the concept of belonging allows, the fact that we need to pay attention to people, pay attention to who they are, what it is that they bring. And we can only do that when we actually start to attentively and purposely begin to listen.
I agree. There was something you said that really stuck out to me. Oh, when you said like even with health and safety, I always think of Lord of the Rings and Gandalf's like, I'm not trying to hurt you, I'm trying to help you. That's that's what I always think of, like when I'm coming at people with questions or whatever. I'm really here to help. Let me in. You've given us some really great strategies too. And I think where sometimes we struggle as professionals, because it is such an emotional, qualitative type of quality, but we struggle with that defining and measuring belonging. There's this feeling that people are sort of getting tired of talking about diversity and equity and inclusion. Like you sort of hear the rumblings like, enough already. But in reality, we haven't really got there yet. Like we've barely scratched the surface, because that feeling of belonging is still precarious at most. It's not like a solid foundation of belonging. It is like sort of there, just there on the edge, like on the precipice. So how do we measure feelings and emotions? How would you recommend organizations sort of take that step to really understand and quantify and qualify what their people are experiencing, so that they can actually start moving to taking steps towards the right direction?
So I would say first off that just to comment on that point about people getting tired, getting tired of the terms, like we're getting tired of the term because it's being used and applied in some really meaningless and disengaged way, right? We put it down on paper and we say, oh, this is the way that we're going to do things. But, you know, people are still being frustrated. They're still being frustrated out of their jobs because their jobs do not accept them as they are, right? And they are not valued, and their voices are not being heard, and they cannot develop meaningful relationships because they're being asked to change themselves and assimilate to the way that things have always been done, rather than allowing that diversity to drive the way that we could do things and do things better. Yeah. So I would say, you know, if we're to think about how we can start to measure those feelings of belonging, I think one of the things, you know, that immediately comes to mind is that perhaps we need to stop. So perhaps we need to move away from the idea of measuring and to go back to the experiencing of, right? The experiencing, and taking all of this as an opportunity to say, is my staff experiencing feelings of belonging and the way that we want to be able to look at and quantify belonging? And I'll just throw another story in here and try to make it really short. So the one organization that I mentioned, I love stories, like I tell stories for hours. The one organization that I mentioned where I actually had a good feeling of belonging, but also was an organization that was still trying to figure out what belonging was. Another problem with DEI is that it seems to be really hot since COVID, right? But all these things have been existing well before COVID. I remember when I was a young officer and I was in the military, I was in a position called adjutant. It was pretty much like a chief of staff position for the commanding officer of the battalion, right? So the chief admin and support position. And I was having a conversation with my commanding officer, and we were talking about promotions, right? We had two female soldiers, two women soldiers, who were qualified for one promotion position. And we had to decide which one would move forward into the position. And I, being a young officer, young woman, who just wanted to get the work done, said to my CO, well, to me, it's really clear, like they're both qualified. They have equal seniority and so on. One is pregnant and will be going on mat leave probably as soon as she occupies the position. And the other one is not going anywhere for any time. So for me, it's a no-brainer. And what my CO did, my commanding officer, what he did was he didn't shame me. He didn't say, how dare you say that? He didn't say, the laws say that you can't discriminate against a person because of their this, that, and the other. He simply took a moment to teach me. Yeah. Right? He taught me. And he taught me in the gentlest of ways. I can say, like, it was a decent conversation. And I walked away learning that even though it was a reasonable point to me to say, oh, one person is pregnant and they're going to be on mat leave for the next few months, and so we won't have them in the post, so we should promote this other person, and it's flawed thinking, right? These are the kinds of conversations that we need to have in order to be able to talk about engaging people with that concept of belonging. Because all those numbers, you know, 75% of people or 75% decrease in sick days, X percentage decrease or increase in job performance, and all of those things really do not say anything if the people on the ground do not feel like they have the space to be themselves and to do their work. And so for me, that was a really wonderful learning opportunity in this concept of belonging, because one, I had a leader that was advocating for people who were not at the table, who were not in the room, right? You have to advocate for people who are not in the room. And then I had a leader who was also saying to me as a junior leader, right? I'm going to teach you how you need to be in order to properly advocate for people in your room. He didn't shame me. He didn't say what, you know, And I was free to ask that question. I was free to make that mistake. And I had a positive experience coming out of it. So these are the things that we need to think about when we start talking about those experiences of belonging. You know, rather than trying to narrow things down into a measurement, do our employees feel like they belong this year? And how many more did this and how many more did that? Let the experiences determine what we see in the outcome or the measurements.
We have a beautiful comment from an attendee. They said, as a serial token hire, I find that the topic of diversity comes in a cycle every few years, but not a lot of is done. And this is detrimental to that person actual mental harm done to employees.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is why we have those spikes in sick leave or sick days, right? And we now have this thing called mental health days where, like, for the first time, I remember I ended up like that job where I talked about that environment where people were pretty much demeaned and devalued by that new leadership that had then hired me on. That was the first time ever I had to actually take a step back from work, take sick days, because it just felt terrible to go into work. And I had trouble sleeping. First time ever I had to take sleeping meds, prescription meds, in order to be able to sleep. And people were just dropping like flies with sick leave. Like, they would say to me personally, Patty, you're my friend. I'm not coming into work tomorrow. Who did you get to write your prescription for your sleep meds?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, you know, and it's unhealthy, but people have to make a living, and we put them in these really awkward positions where they have to choose between their mental health and well-being and their ability to earn a living. And it's not right. And it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. But we have too many prescriptions and policies that go to the contrary, and that feeds the sense that we're doing the right thing when we're actually not doing the right thing by people.
Yumelo actually added, she says she wasn't done typing yet. She hit enter by accident. I do that all the time too. But there's, you know, it's detrimental to mental health those employees that are struggling to belong. So how do we make some of these diversity decisions sustainable? And I'm going to just forward our slides because I think we sort of talk about this in the good news, right? I think, Pat Lee, what you're saying is we need to be qualifying what is happening in our workplace through experiences. And I think we need to do that all the time. I don't think there's ever a place where we're like, okay, we're good. We're completely diverse and inclusive now, and everybody belongs, because things change, people change, politics change, the world changes. You know, the workplace is a variable, right? It's always going to change. So that's why I think definitely an answer to that would be finding a way to systemically qualify what people are actually experiencing at work would be one way to make it sustainable. And understanding that these transformations have to be intentional. They have to have meaning to them, right? Like, it has to be a meaningful activity, which is also what you've said a lot too. It's not just the paper, it's not just the policy. I mean, we've seen this in health and safety as well, in HR, and a lot of these things. We think we just throw a piece of paper and okay, we've satisfied the requirement. But what if we actually want to do the thing? Like, what if we actually want to be belonging? What if we actually want diversity? What if we actually want to be healthy and safe and happy and mentally well? What would that look like? Because I think sometimes people forget that we have these laws in place, even in Canada, especially with human rights and that type of stuff. Yeah, they're there, but they're there as a minimum. They're not there as the go-to. They're there as an absolutely bare minimum of treating people with some dignity and respect. But if you follow the intention of some of these laws, why they're in place, how they benefit all of us, that's when we get some meaning. And I think, and I'm going to get you to also add on here, and I think another way to make it sustainable is to not make it separate from everything else that you do. So just like when you're doing whatever in safety, we do hazard assessments along with stuff that we're doing at work. In HR, you do onboarding when you're doing recruiting, right? And you can add belonging into that process. So I think if you can tie processes holistically that add belonging automatically to what you're already doing, then it's built right into the mix of what you're already doing. Like, it's built, it's there, and it doesn't work without it, right? So I was saying to Pat Lee, one example that I used to always use and will continue to do as I recruit in Canada here for this new company is I always had a buddy. I always assigned people a buddy, and they weren't managers, they weren't leaders, there was no hierarchy between them. It was just one person that I knew this person could feel absolutely safe with, that could be their go-to person if they had questions, if they felt unsure, uncertain, maybe were nervous to talk to a manager or a leader, or had to question, small question. And they had to talk at least once a day for the first week, and at least once every second day for a little bit, and just really get to know each other. And that was very, very successful. And people being like, I feel really close here. Like, I feel like I can be myself. I know it's not always perfect, but it definitely was a step in the right direction. How about you? What would be your good news? How can people do this and do it in a way that's sustainable?
Yeah, I think my thing that I would throw in there is that we need to make it personal, right? We need to make it, these are principles that we need to absorb on a personal, human, WHOLE, holistic level in terms of our learning and our interactions with people around us. Like we have to sort of take this on as part of our existence of being human, and recognize that it is part of the existence of the part of the process of interacting with other humans.
Yes.
And that's where we get the purposefully listening, the doing away with judgment, the developing of trust, and all of those things. Those are things that are needed in communities. And so when we approach our place of work, just like we'd approach our most loved community, we're bringing those things in. We're not shaming, we're supporting, we're teaching, we're creating conditions for learning and still holding people accountable. That's when you're going to have that process of belonging unfolding. And like I said, it's not the organization that already has belonging sort of plastered all over it that is going to be the place where you find belonging. It's a place where you're going to have the opportunities for the conversations about facilitating that sense of belonging, where you can have the conflict and let it come to its natural outcome, right?
That's real competence. Absolutely. Thank you. So I know we're running just a little bit over. Thank you to everybody for sticking with us. I do want to let you know that for the toolkit, I'm going to have for everybody that's on a Better Together assessment. So it's actually an assessment that you can do almost like a gap analysis on the sense of belonging at work, and then also including a how to foster belonging checklist. So not just assessing, but also here are some things that you can put into place that could potentially work for you. But of course, you're always going to use these things in a way that makes sense for your organizations, because as Pat Lee said, it has to be personal and it has to be meaningful. So these are just things to guide you and get the juices flowing towards figuring out what could potentially work in your workplaces for your people to feel belonging. And then of course, I always end just with a little like who we are. So at Ignite Purpose, and Pat Lee has a great company that does great corporate work as well too. So we do different leadership alignment programs. We do group coaching, one-on-one coaching. We do behavior profiling. We do outplacement services, transition services. We do lots of sort of leadership, and we're actually moving into the recruiting space as well, which is really great. And we do this because we just really have a belief that being better together starts with growing ourselves first, and then learning how to lead others well. And that comes from that personal relationship that Pat Lee talked about. And what makes us different is we really work right beside you. We help you implement and integrate these systems right into your workplace. So please just don't hesitate to contact me. If you aren't sure if you're going to get the toolkit, feel free to email me. And if you have any questions for either myself or Pat Lee, please feel free to reach out and contact us. And other than that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. And if you have questions that you still like to answer, we'll stay on the webinar for a little bit longer just to see if questions trickle in. But for those of you that are leaving, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, Pat Lee, for all the wisdom and wonderful experiences that you shared with us.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Sharon says thank you. Very insightful.
Oh, thank you, Sharon.
I usually just hang on a little bit longer just in case.
Yeah.
Someone anonymous said, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat afterwards. It's kind of hard to look at the chat while I'm speaking. But yeah,
Hi,
that was fun. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question, Yamilo. That was a really great question.
Mhm.
Sustainable, like keep
Yes.
working at it, but make it human.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was good. Did you enjoy it? Are you happy with it?
I am. You can tell I've got lots of stories, right?
Yes.
I probably did a little bit more talking.
Yes, we'll talk to you soon, Dee. I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Milo says thanks as well.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks, Yamilo. You're so much better at managing the chat than I am, Chrissy.
Just practice.
Oh.
Look at me going from slide to slides. I was like, oh, like we had a lot of hot messes in there, but we did it. We did good. That's what life is, right? It's not about, just like you said, it's not about being perfect. It's about what can we learn from our experience.
To learn and accepting that learning. Accepting that learning.
Yes. All right, perfect. Do you want me to give you a quick call? Do you want to debrief, or do you want to just go off and then give me a call when you're free later? What would you prefer?
Yeah, I'll do the latter. I think I should have eaten my lunch before I started.
Yes,
but
go
I was
rest. Go fill your belly. Go have a rest, and
yeah,
then we'll chit
I've got
chat.
a journal together session tonight, so I'm
Yes.
gonna.
Oh yes, go prepare. Go. I'll touch
Yeah.
base with you, but honestly, you're amazing. I love you so much. Thank you so much for doing this.
I really appreciated the opportunity to do this. Like I wasn't sure what to expect. I've never done a webinar
Yeah,
before.
this is it.
Well, not as a panelist, like I've been on webinars and stuff.
Mhm.
But, like,
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I love you. I'll talk to you later.
Love you too.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.